So the second characteristic, very important characteristic of literature, is the element of emotion, is the element of feelings. See, when you were studying in the previous semesters, you must have studied some poems, you must have studied some novels or some plays. There is not a single work of art in which you do not find the element of feelings or emotions. In fact, it makes the presence of emotions or feelings in a work of art makes it more alarming, more touching, or moving. It touches the heart of the readers. It touches or it appeals the heart of the reader. The primary function of any good work of art, a good piece of literature, is to move the reader. And this function of moving the reader is achieved only when there is an element of emotions or feelings in that work of art. In fact, this is the only reason why the great Greek philosopher Plato also rejected poets and poetry on the basis of the idea that it carries emotions. A good work of art carries emotions, and that is the reason why Plato rejected the poets and poetry from his country, Greece. Now that is another discussion which we don't want to enter into that discussion right now, but when you will start studying semester 5 or 6, that time we will discuss this idea of Plato in detail. But my point is, no work of art or no piece of literature can exist without emotions or without feelings. If you check out some of the important plays written by William Shakespeare, say for example Hamlet. In Hamlet, there is an emotion which is carried forward all through the play, and that is the emotion of a son for his father, his attachment for his father. If you examine the play, the tragedy written by William Shakespeare, there is also one another emotion, that is the love for the daughters, a father's love for his daughter. The point is, no work of art can exist without emotions. Another important characteristic of literature is imagination. In my previous lecture, I told you that literature is the reflection of life. Literature is the mirror to life and society. That means what? It reflects. That is not the original, because a reflection can never be original. When you stand before a mirror, you see your own reflection. But that reflection is not real. The real is something which is standing, something who is standing before the mirror. So, literature, in a way you can say that it is, because it is a reflection, because it is a copy, it is not real. And it is not real, that means it is full of imagination. Why? Because when a writer or when an author he observes the society, he observes the life of the people, and he wants to project the same life in his literature, in his novel, or in his poetry, But when he projects these things, he needs a tool to present this idea, to present the life of a person. And that tool is the tool of imagination. With the help of imagination, he adds color to the life. In fact, if I recall Acharya Mammat from Sanskrit literature, Acharya Mammat has very nicely presented it by saying that every literature or a true literature is better than this society, better than this world. Now try to understand, there are two worlds. One world in which we are living, and this world is created by Almighty God. And there is another world which is created by the poet. There is another world which is created by a dramatist or a novelist, in which you find the same kind of life, so the same kind of characters, the same kind of people, the same kinds of problems, the same kinds of aspirations and ambitions, the same kinds of success and failure. They are all presented in literature by the author, by the writer. So there are two creators, one the Almighty who created this world in which we are living, and there is another creator called the author, the writer, who has created another world, and that world is full of imagination. That is an imaginative world. But Acharya Mammat has said it nicely that this imaginative world of literature is better than this real world. Why? Because in real world there are so many limitations. There are hundreds of limitations in the world which is created by Almighty God. Why? Because here in this world a day can be of 24 hours only. A lotus can grow in the mud only. That is the limitation. But in the world of imagination, in the imaginative world of the poet, a lotus can grow on the hands of a lady. That is the charm, that is the beauty of poetry. There is no limitation in the world of the author, in the world of the poet. Why? Because imagination plays a very important role here. So my friends, in short, what I wanted to tell you is that imagination is one of the primary characteristics of literature. Another important characteristic of literature is the reflection of life and society. As we discussed earlier, the author who lives in this world, he observes the life of the people, he observes the society, and he tries to present it in his own play, in his own novel, in his own short story, or in his own poetry. So, true literature must give the picture of the society. If you read the literature written in India during 1930s or 1940s, then you will see that that literature was full of the idea of freedom fighters. That literature which was produced in 1940s or 50s or 60s, that literature is full of patriotism. Why? Because in those times, people were living the life which was full of patriotism. The hearts and minds of the people living in India during 1930s, 40s or 50s, they were full of patriotism, love for the country. And that is the reason why the literature which was produced during those times is full of the love for the country. If you read the modern literature, 21st century literature, You will find the use of technology in literature. Why? Because we are living in the times of technology. So the point is that every work of art or true literature reflects the society as it is. It reflects the life as it is. Another important characteristic of literature is moral value, because true literature must teach something to the readers. It has an important role to play in the society. Why? As I told you earlier, that it makes a life a better life. It makes a human being a better human being. Now how does literature do this? Literature does this with some moral values. Every work of art, every true piece of literature must carry some very nice thought in it. Say for example, when we read Hamlet, we understand, we learn something from that play. We learn from the conflict of to be or not to be, that is a question. That was the conflict of Hamlet. We learn something from that we must not think too much in our life. We must act in our life. This is the message that we receive from Hamlet. When we read Old Man and the Sea, we learn some moral values from that novel written by Ernest Hemingway. We learn that man is not made for defeat. Man can be destroyed but cannot be defeated. Every work of art, when you read Bhagavad Gita, you learn so many good lessons, moral values from Bhagavad Gita. So point is, true work of art or true literature must have the capacity to release some good thoughts, some noble thoughts, some moral values for the society, for the whole culture. And that is the reason why such literature is known as the literature of power. Because the literature which has some moral values has the capacity, has the power to change the society, to change the whole culture. So before moving further, there are still some more characteristics like plot construction, setting, characters and conflict. These all things we will discuss in the next lecture. But before we finish this lecture, friends, let me recall the whole discussion of these two lectures right now. That literature, everything which is written or printed is called literature. This is the definition of literature given by De Quincey. De Quincey has divided literature into two types, literature of knowledge and literature of power. The literature which gives us some information about any particular area is called literature of knowledge. Say for example, calendars, timetables, magazines, newspapers, dictionaries, medical reports, etc. All these are called literature of knowledge. On the other hand, you have literature of power, like Hamlet, Macbeth, King Lear, Othello, Romeo and Juliet, Old Man and the Sea, Bhagavad Gita, Quran, Bible. All these are called literature of power. We have discussed some 5 important characteristics of literature so far. 1. Universality. Universality means it appeals to all, in all ages, at all places, to all cultures. Imagination and emotions are also very important characteristics of literature which we discussed just now. And reflection of life. This is also very important in literature. Moral values, again, is important. Why? Because as I told you, it has a very important role to play. Literature has a very important role to play in our life, and that's why true literature must release some moral values, some noble thoughts to the society. Here we end up for today. The rest of the things we will discuss in the next lecture. If you have any questions, any doubts, or any queries, feel free to call me on my WhatsApp number. Thank you. Thank you very much.